All right, so let's talk about Alien Rogue Incursion. And man, this game really wants you to remember Alien Isolation. Like, it really wants you to remember it. The second you boot it up, it's practically waving its arms in your face going, "Hey, remember Isolation? Remember 2014? That was cool, right?" You've got worker Joes lurking around, Amanda Ripley's name gets dropped, Sevastopol Station gets referenced more than once. It's not subtle about it at all. But here's the funny part. For all the ways it tries to connect itself to that horror masterpiece, what you actually end up playing feels way more like Colonial Marines than anything else. And look, I know that sounds like I'm about to roast the game into ashes, but honestly, it's not entirely an insult. It just sets your expectations for what kind of ride you're in for. Basically, you're in a shooter where you're stacking up xenomorph corpses using a handful of pretty standard weapons, running around yet another shady corporation tried to weaponize aliens facility. This time, you're Zula-Davis. She's a tough space marine type, and she crash lands on the planet Purdon with her synthetic buddy Davis after getting a distress call from a friend. Classic setup. The place you end up in is called Castor's Cradle, and depending on which files you dig into, it's either run by GES or Weyland-Yutani. Either way, surprise, surprise, the place is absolutely infested with xenomorphs. Zula's plan? Pretty straightforward. Blow the whole thing sky high and take the infestation down with it. No frills, no fancy plot twists. And that kind of sums up the story. It hits all the expected beats you'd imagine from an alien shooter. There's nothing you can really sink your teeth into narratively. Most of the characters feel like cardboard cutouts, except for Davis, and honestly, Davis kind of steals the show. He's got charm, some personality, and the voice acting between Zula and Davis is actually solid. That dynamic kicks in early, and it does a lot of heavy lifting through the more forgettable stretches of the plot. Most of the writing is just there to move you from point A to point B. Here's the next sector, here's the next objective, here's why you need to go blow up this thing. And when the game does wrap up its story, it doesn't really. It just ends on this abrupt cliffhanger, leaving basically every loose thread dangling. And that's because this is literally part one of a two-part story, which, okay, explains why it feels incomplete, but it doesn't make that gut punch any less annoying when the credits roll and you realize, wait, that's it? That's half a narrative? So here's the thing. Even though the story is pretty flat, the actual gameplay loop, it works. Like, it's not mind-blowing, but it clicks. The facility, Castor's Cradle, is basically this big, interconnected maze of locked doors, sealed passages, and shortcuts. You slowly unlock it piece by piece with key cards or tools, and that kind of progression is super satisfying. You're always low on ammo or med kits because you can only carry so much at once. So there's this low-key tension even when the aliens themselves aren't that scary. And because there's no autosave, every mistake hurts. If you screw up, you lose progress. You have to find these panic rooms scattered around to save manually. And trust me, it stings when you forget and lose a chunk of progress. Exploration-wise, this is where the game actually shines. You're poking your head into side rooms, reading notes left by employees, finding supply caches, and slowly mapping the place in your brain. And when you unlock a sealed door that suddenly connects back to somewhere you've already been, man, that lizard brain dopamine rush hits. The whole facility eventually folds back on itself in a really deliberate way. And the game does the classic, hey, you just got a new tool, now go back and open those locked doors you saw earlier thing. And it works. It makes backtracking feel purposeful. Now, when it comes to combat, you've got your trusty tracker to tell you when a xenomorph is nearby. And when it beeps, you've got exactly 3 weapons to deal with it: a revolver, a pulse rifle, and a riot shotgun. That's the whole arsenal. The shotgun's fun at point-blank range, and the revolver has enough punch to make it worthwhile, but overall, the weapons feel limited. There's no smart gun, no real alien-shredding powerhouse. And when you're actually hitting xenomorphs, they either shrug off your shots or just collapse like soggy noodles. There's no satisfying impact. Their acid blood should be terrifying, but in practice, it barely registers. What actually makes them a challenge is that they're damage sponges. So combat turns into more of an ammo management problem than a holy crap, these things are scary problem. And that's kind of the big issue.
repetition. You're fighting exactly one type of xenomorph. Just one. Add in some facehuggers and a single boss fight, and that's the entire enemy roster. No variants, no dog aliens, no bull xenomorphs, nothing to keep things spicy. They do crawl on ceilings, sneak up through vents, and they've got that insta-kill pounce if they get close. But honestly, in practice, they're just not that threatening, especially in this non-VR version where you can predict their attacks pretty easily. The encounters all start feeling the same. Watch your tracker, wait for the alien to show up, shoot until it drops, rinse and repeat. It's a shame, because the framework for tense, unpredictable encounters is there, but the game never quite pushes it. That said, the game does mix things up with defense segments. These moments where you've got to hold your ground while waiting for a door to unlock or a system to power up, those are awesome. You can actually prep, plant proximity grenades around choke points, close doors to funnel aliens, reroute power to lock down vents. That kind of stuff makes you feel clever, and honestly, I wish there was more of it. Imagine if you had automated turrets or permanent door sealing. As it is, it's simple, but it works, and it's a highlight. Then you've got puzzles, mostly rewiring fuse boxes to reroute power. On paper, yeah, that sounds annoying, but they're fast, responsive, and they don't bog things down. They add variety, at least for a while. The downside is they get predictable. You do a puzzle, you pick up an important item, and, surprise, an alien spawns. After a while, you're like, yep, here it comes. That predictability kind of kills the horror.
And speaking of horror, this isn't really a scary game, not in the way Isolation was. Outside of a handful of moments, like the facehugger introduction, which is pants-wettingly good, especially in VR, most of the time you're just mowing down predictable aliens in hallways. There is one standout moment, though, carrying a severed robot head through an entire xenomorph colony with only your shotgun and barely any ammo. That section, chef's kiss. You actually have to think, use the environment, and play smart. It's tense in all the right ways. But those moments are rare. Most of the time, you're just clearing corridors. All right, credit where it's due, the audio design in Alien Rogue Incursion is actually really solid. The silence when you first step off your ship, it's heavy. It creates this oppressive atmosphere that hangs over you the whole time. And when xenomorphs show up, the score pounces. The music swells, the panic hits. They nailed that part. The voice acting between Davis and Zula is also really good. Their dynamic feels natural right from the start, which is important because, let's be honest, the actual dialogue isn't giving them much to work with, but the performances sell it anyway. That said, there are some rough edges. Audio balancing can be a mess, NPCs talk over each other sometimes, and during the boss fight, the sound effects drown out Davis's instructions to the point where you can barely hear what you're supposed to do. And occasionally, sound cues just don't play. Like something scary should happen, and instead it's awkward silence. Instant immersion breaker. Visually, the game nails that alien retro-future aesthetic. You know, chunky terminals, industrial hallways, worn-down facilities. Some areas actually look really moody and atmospheric. They get that vibe right. But overall, the graphics have this kind of mobile game sheen that a lot of VR titles have, even though this one's built on Unreal 5. The shadows are fuzzy, textures aren't particularly sharp, and nothing screams cutting edge. The entire facility is just endless gunmetal gray paneling, and after a few hours, yeah, it starts to blur together. And you can definitely tell this started life as a VR game. Everything about it screams ported. The text is gigantic, there's no camera shake or inertia when you move, and running just makes your character slide forward faster without any visual feedback. All those cool physical interactions from the VR version reduced to simple button prompts you can't even fail. It's exactly as thrilling as it sounds. Performance-wise, the non-VR version is a big step up from the original release. On PC, at max settings with ray tracing, the game runs smoothly. No stuttering, no major slowdowns. That's a big improvement compared to the VR version, which apparently had some nasty performance problems. But don't get too comfortable, there are still technical gremlins. For example, the flashlight turns off every time you interact with something.
So you'll be rewiring a fuse box in the dark, fumbling around, muttering under your breath. Sometimes your directional controls just stop working after exiting a puzzle, so you have to reload or awkwardly dodge slide to the nearest save point. Auto-aim is hilariously bad. It'll yank your shots away from enemies, so turning it off entirely is honestly the better move. And then there's stability. One player had the game crash 9 times before it would even boot. Another got soft-locked because a Xenomorph refused to spawn during a required encounter. Fun times.
The campaign itself is around 6 to 7 hours if you explore thoroughly, a bit shorter if you rush. For $29.99, that's not outrageous. But here's the thing. The game kind of runs out of steam in the back half. Even though it's not that long, by the time you're approaching the end, you've basically seen all it has to offer. Same enemies, same puzzles, same loop. And then you hit that sort of final boss, the credits roll, and nothing resolves. It doesn't even feel like the end of Chapter 1. It just stops. So, after all that sneaking, shooting, rewiring, and saving at panic rooms, what's the big picture here? Honestly, Alien Rogue Incursion feels like a solid framework for something way cooler, but not quite the fully fleshed out experience it should have been. The story, for one, just kind of fizzles. We never really get that satisfying payoff. No major twists, no big revelations. Davis and Zula's dynamic is fun while it lasts, but it doesn't actually go anywhere. There's no emotional arc, no character growth, no oh damn moment. The plot starts with a pretty standard, we're stuck on a xenomorph-infested station setup, coasts along, and then ends with a boss fight that doesn't feel climactic. It's like watching a TV season that ends on episode 7 instead of 10. You're left waiting for the big twist that never comes. And that's the thing. This game could have been something special. The level design is genuinely clever, the atmosphere is strong, and those defense segments? Gold. There are glimpses of brilliance, but the repetition just kills the momentum. When you're fighting the same xenomorphs over and over with the same 3 guns in the same gray corridors, it starts feeling less like trapped in a horror facility and more like stuck in a loop. It's especially noticeable if you compare it to Alien Isolation. Isolation terrified people because the alien was unpredictable, lethal, and there was this sense that you were constantly being hunted. Here, the aliens are damage sponges you can outsmart. They're not scary, they're obstacles. The game never really uses the Alien license to push tension. No scripted scares that linger, no clever sound-based horror moments, no escalation in enemy behavior. Just more hallways, more Xenos, more shooting. And that abrupt ending? It doesn't feel like a cliffhanger. It feels like the devs ran out of time or budget. There's no to be continued, no real narrative hook. You just defeat the boss, Davis says a few lines, and boom, credits. It's jarring. Price-wise, $30 for 6 to 7 hours isn't awful, especially if you're a die-hard Alien fan and just want a bit of atmosphere with some old-school shooter vibes. It's competent, it works, it's not broken beyond repair, but it's also not the kind of game that's going to stick with you. You'll play it, maybe enjoy parts of it, and then forget about it a week later. If anything, it feels like the developers built a solid foundation, a good first act, and then didn't build the rest of the house. If this had another 6 to 8 hours, some enemy variety, a more intense second half, and an actual narrative payoff, it could have been great. As it stands, it's just fine. Not bad, not amazing, just fine. And honestly, that's kind of frustrating, because you can see the potential right there. The facility's design is genuinely smart. The defense segments flirt with brilliance. The atmosphere is nailed. And then the game just keeps repeating itself until it ends without a bang. So yeah, if you're curious, or if you just want a short atmospheric shooter with some light tension and solid exploration, it's worth picking up on sale. But if you're looking for the next Alien Isolation, this isn't it.
Alien Rogue Incursion is like a really promising pilot episode that never gets its full season. Cool ideas, solid vibes, but it stops just when it starts getting good.